Good morning. Hope you guys are doing fine. I love the jacket. You know, it's something
I got showed up.
No, it's something I would wear.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. You know, I like color. You know, my mom was very, very colorful. I'm with Hiller, and what we do is fire protection equipment, period. And the branch that Larry and I, that's with our office in Wilmington, North Carolina, concentrates on lithium-ion battery installations for utility companies, large ones. And I've been with them for a little bit, almost 2 years. And I'm Bobby Ruiz. I come from the fire side. So I've spent 46 years in the fire side, which is aging me. And you can do the math. I tell people that I was a baby dropped off at the doorsteps of Station 1 when I was born. So do the math. But I also taught at ASU as an associate professor in the Department of Emergency Management. So I did that for about 20 years. Retired the second time from Peoria Fire as their fire chief. And Paul Hayes with Hiller came and recruited me. And I told him I didn't want to work. And he didn't take no for an answer. You know Paul very well. And so he needed someone to translate firemanese to the engineers and the public at large. So here I am. But I have two direct experiences with energy storage systems. One was McMicken in Surprise, Arizona, April 19th of 2019. And Surprise has a hazmat team, except they were on a medical call because most of the departments in Arizona are all hazard departments. So the next closest one was Peoria, Arizona. So it was my hazmat team that responded to it and dealt with it. I had another one that the day that I was hired was Chandler, Arizona had a 7,000 square foot warehouse full of batteries that also went up and up. And I'll talk a little bit about some political realities also that we don't put into the formula. But McMicken was one oversized Connex box about 50 feet by somewhere around 15 feet or so. It had 2 megawatt system, and it was a wake-up call not only for America, but I think the world. And it had 34 racks, 14 modules per rack, and again 2 megawatt system. And they had a third party that monitored a smoke alarm, and that's the only thing they had inside. There was no regulations essentially during that time. The only permits that were required was for the cement slab that the Connex box went on and the fence around it. That was it. The fire department didn't know it existed. No one knew what was inside of it. And matter of fact, the SMEs, which have exponentially grown their experience and their knowledge on batteries, at that time was very little. Matter of fact, when the first company got there, the hazmat captain asked one of the SMEs, "What's inside the box?" And they said, "Batteries." "What kind of batteries?" I said, "Just batteries." Later on, I don't think I have a picture of it, is when they arrived there, there's this white fog along the ground, heavy, dense fog. Matter of fact, it was a passerby on one of the highways that was about a quarter mile away. They called it in as a field fire, a grass fire. And the third-party electrical company had a smoke detector that went off inside. Then they lost communication with it. And they didn't call it in until an hour later. Actually, the first callers that were passing down the highway called it in first, and you had, again, this white fog. The fire department asked the SMEs, what's the white fog? As a matter of fact, they talked to the chemist of the utility company, and he said it's just halon. Well, the fire department knew, the captain knew, that halon hadn't been available commercially for about 25 years. So they knew there's a red flag. And so for the next 2.5 hours, when they first got there, where they got their meters, they went inside the fence line, and they got high readings. They got pegged out on hydrogen cyanide, they got pegged out on carbon monoxide and ethane and a few other gases there. But their concern was the hydrogen cyanide. So for the next 2.5 hours, they very methodically go in and out, taking readings until they didn't get any readings anymore. And so at one point towards the end, they decide, okay, we're going to turn over this structure to the utility company, is we need to make sure that there's no toxic gases, like the hydrogen cyanide, inside the container, because as soon as we leave, the utility company is going to go in and try to see what the problem is and replace whatever needs to be replaced. And so they opened the door. 2 minutes and 20 seconds later, when they opened the door, they found, which was very odd to them, was a dense cloud inside from the ground about 5 foot up, very dense. And it started to roll out on them a little bit. So the captain sticks a meter in there, and it's curiosity that got him, because the plan was they're going to open the door, get out, because there's a chance of explosion. And so they see this white fog, and they stick the meter right in the white fog. They get nothing of the meters. They clear the meter, they start doing this, they get nothing. And so 2 minutes and 20 seconds later, it explodes. And so what you're seeing here, and I apologize for not having a pointer, but what you see here is where the captain ended up from the door, and that's a steel door there, and steel encasement. And also the back door, the end cap, got blown out of there. It wasn't open or anything, but got blown out of there. The other firefighter was about 30 feet away from the fence line, suspected that they got blown under the fence that far away. The other firefighter had a hose line that was by inside the fence line. The captain told him when they went in the fence line that that wasn't for the batteries, that was for them in case something happened. So he was a young firefighter, been on the job for about a year. He gets blown back against the fence, goes unconscious momentarily, wakes up, sees this brush on fire here, and he squirts it, not realizing the captain's there. So at that point, they call him Mayday as soon as it happened. Transported him to a trauma center and burn center, 2 of them. They sustained extensive injuries. They weren't expected to live. Luckily, they did. But there was a lot of lessons learned from it, which I'll go over. This is a test that was done on how to have. It's an enormous amount of vapor. Firefighters asked how These are the gases that are typically found from the batteries, and I say that with a caveat because you end up with the hydrogen cyanide, sulfur, hydrogen fluoride, which is you get it more from the containers, the plastic containers, than you do the batteries. And when I'm teaching firefighters, I tell them, you know, this is what you see in a house fire. And so it's not the boogeyman, it's technology. And we're just getting used to it and dealing with it. But like any other technology, propane or anything else, there is a dangerous factor there, even though we feel comfortable with some of the other technologies, is you still got a lot of the gases. Carbon monoxide is kind of interesting because firefighters are always around it. You know, there's about 1,000 residential fires per day in the United States alone. So comparably to the incidents that you're seeing with this, these are minuscule compared to some of the other fire incidents that we go on. But the carbon monoxide is interesting. I was telling Brian that I had a chance to sit down and spend some time with Dr. Salaj. It used to be with Polytech, Wusu Polytech, and he's one of the explosive experts in the world. And he started off with brain explosions and dust explosions, and he's now retired. But I told him, well, it's pretty obvious what set it off was the hydrogen. And he said, don't be so quick to think that it may have been hydrogen. He told me it may have been the carbon monoxide. And being a firefighter, being around it all my life, it's you never think of it as an explosive. And as a matter of fact, carbon monoxide has an explosive range of about 12% to 74%, where hydrogen is like 4% to 72%. So it's still a wide range. I mean, and so he told me it could have been a carbon monoxide that triggered everything off. So that was kind of a point of interest. Sure.
What were those percentages
of hydrogen?
Yeah,
or explosive range? It's about 4% to 72%.
So in the atmosphere, there's 4 to 72%. That's when it's.
That's where it's volatile to an explosion. For air. And so a lot of the lessons learned were that you can go in and there may still be trapped gases somewhere. And give me the 5 sign. So there's a lot of lessons learned that you know, the explosion factor is the biggest factor that we're concerned with. The second is the gases and where they go if you have a neighborhood nearby. And so a lot of the lessons learned out of McMicken turned into what we see in 855 today, an NFPA. So day after we started doing education, we started working with NFPA, my bosses, on one of the main committees, and started working, how do we eliminate it? Well, one of the things that we do in Wilmington is a hazardous mitigation analysis. And that's a small book. It has a fire analysis in there. It has a emergency response plan within it, which is what the fire department needs, because it has all the information of what's in there, all the contacts that they need to call and wait for an SME. It has to have a 9540 listing under UL or some other ones, equipment that shows that the equipment, the batteries and everything else has been certified to do what it's supposed to and not have a major factor. 9548 is a burn test at the cell level module and full test of burning a container. And one of the things that if it fails is because it propagated to another container. So one of the requirements is to keep it within that one cube container, whatever you want to call it, without propagating. Sensors, smoke, heat, and gas, ventilation system, I think that's the biggest piece of the solution is if you can get rid of that gas right away, and the vast majority of light and air, is you solve the explosion problem. So the sensors, though, have to trigger the ventilation system immediately. Because if it happens, as you saw, the gas fills up, the volume fills up in a room or a container very quickly. And it very quickly goes above the explosion limit, which means that just a matter of time, what goes up comes down into the range, or the exposure range, it's going to explode. And I'm convinced that McMicken, they wouldn't have opened that door. It's just a matter of time that it was going to explode. It may have been 5 hours later, may have been a day later, but it was going to explode. Once you get it to those levels, the batteries have their own, what we call tetrahedron. It has its own heat source. The positive electrode on it, the cathode is what we call it, creates its own oxygen. And so you got heat, you got oxygen already in there, and you got the fuel, which is burning and propagating from one cell to the next. And so defragration panels, although they're supposed to direct explosion, to me it's not prevention. It's an after fact that you're trying to direct this mass energy, pure energy, to escape in a certain direction, but it's not prevention. Ventilation system is prevention. Suppression system, you're going to see everything out there from water, sprinkler systems, to nothing. And it's still kind of early on. There's a lot of testing going on. Water can create problems because the electrical buses, it goes up and it starts to propagate the problem in the first place. Clean agents, which are colorless and odorless, and that's why firefighters knew that what was in there wasn't just a clean agent, and they had a clean agent in there. Clean agents, you got to confine the clean agent for it to do its work. Now, the batteries are going to propagate no matter what you put on. They're going to be very difficult to put out. And so, the clean agents, it to me confines the explosion gases. And then you have everything else going on in the battery will set it off. So I'm not in favor of clean agents, and you're not seeing a whole lot of them. But you got like Tesla that has some igniters, just like you do in a gas stove when it clicks to ignite it, is as soon as a sensor picks up any kind of gas, the igniters go off and they actually set it off and burn it. And then some that have ventilation systems and don't have any kind of suppression system, which again, they're looking at escaping the gas and letting it burn. Let it consume itself philosophy is what we're teaching out there, is that you're doing everybody a favor by allowing it to consume itself. Is you have stranded energy no matter what in there that is dangerous, and in the cleanup phase, it costs a whole lot of money to be able to take that equipment out to de-energize it as much as it can, because you can't zero it out. And so what happens is, even if you have one module that catches on fire, the rest of them have been exposed to smoke and heat, the warranties are nullified. Insurance companies will insure the other ones if they do, or to London or somebody, it's high rate. So there's nothing to save. And independent power providers know that, so they'd rather just let it consume itself. What we tell is firefighters is to, stay away, wait for the SME. And if you're going to put water or anything, put it on the exposures. If it's starting to propagate, if a high wind or whatever's going on, to try to protect that exposure. Let the container that's on fire burn, consume itself. And then unified command, where they're making decisions along with the SMEs or the utility company and so forth. Questions? I thought I got rid of these, but this is interesting because this was in Chandler, Arizona. That was the day I got hired. The fire chief asked me to come in and help them with the responsible parties in their meeting, and they had a fire in one of the racks going, one of the modules, and so that started the night before. The sprinkler, they had a high density sprinkler system going off in there, and so the meeting the next morning, I asked the installers of the batteries, are you okay with letting your content burn? The batteries burn. They said, yeah, no problem. Let them burn. I turn around and the owners of the building, the structure, and I asked them, are you okay with letting your structure burn? And I said, just a minute. I called somebody else, I got a VP, and the VP said, well, a little hesitant, but I don't want anybody to hurt. Yes, let it burn. So I looked at the fire chief, and he said, that's our plan. We're just going to let it burn. We'll be out of there in about 4 hours once it consumes itself. Now, I had 260 racks in there, 14 modules per rack. And there was an eyewitness, a guy in there, electrician, that saw towards the middle of the building that it started to burn. And got out. Well, by 3 o'clock that afternoon, it hit the media, and people 5 miles away started coughing, saying their asthma got triggered, their father had a heart attack because of what was coming out of that building. I was there 12 days and never saw anything come out except from this roller door here on top, this infamous white smoke that came out about 10 feet out and dissipated. Nothing more. Never saw anything more come out of it. But by 3 o'clock that afternoon, the city management, the politicians, and the lawyers for the city said, keep doing something, keep running the water. So for 12 days, water ran. Anybody want to take a guess how much water was consumed?
A couple million gallons.
How much?
A couple million gallons at least.
About 1 million gallons. Anybody else? 5 million gallons of water.
Arizona.
In Arizona.
Yep.
In the desert. And so they had a big water basin on the other side of this that held 350,000 gallons. And by day 2, it was about full. So they started to draft it into tankers and taking it away. And EPA said they could dump it into the reclamation center, but not the storm drain, so they did that. So 5 million gallons of water, this is what you see. From front to back. Nothing. You do nothing.
How does all this translate to the burning, the exploding car?
The exploding car?
Like the Tesla exploded.
I'm not familiar with an explosion of a Tesla. Are you, Brian? Brian could talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, we might be able to talk about that afterwards.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, but they're very difficult to put out. EVs in general. And so there's no magic silver bullet yet, but we're training firefighters how to deal with it. Band-aid approach to get it out of there to let it burn somewhere else.
And would your assessment be that if it starts burning, it's total and nothing?
It is total.
Yeah.
It about a minute into it, you lost the car.
It's the most valuable component on the car. So generally, if it's damaged, the car is totaled. The shell is totaled. There's really nothing you can do with it.
So you said something about clickers, that Tesla installed clickers to actually set off.
For the containers,
Yeah.
yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, what
Yeah,
kind of
basically,
situation is that?
yeah, what they have is they have the equivalent of a spark plug system, okay, that they periodically trigger. So that if they do get generation of battery gases, if they do get evolution of gases in the plume, their system's actually designed to take advantage of a physics effect, a chimney effect, to draw air from the bottom of the unit to actually burn those gases separate from the cells. So the cells vent into a common plenum. The plenum basically has the opportunity now with the sparker that if you do have the evolution of gases, you're burning them actively, which now cuts down on that concern about HF and a lot of volumes being engaged.
Right.
Combusting.
Although in Australia,
Yeah.
it consumed one whole container and they had wind, so it was propagating to two other ones. The fire department, took care of the exposures and let it consume the one on fire.
Hey, Chief, is there a possibility of putting an NFPA 704 emblem on these buildings?
Yes,
To identify the hazards?
yeah, it's required.
That's required.
It's required now. Question?
When you said Tesla, I'm assuming you're referring to the Powerwall storage systems?
Power walls are residential. I'm talking about the
These are called
industrial,
mega packs. They're for grid level storage. They're
Okay.
very large, the size of a semi trailer.
Yeah, it's a Conex box.
Even though electric vehicle fires are much more rare than gasoline-powered vehicle fires, we're seeing knee-jerk reactions where parking garages are starting to ban EVs. Now, the state of Texas legislature in the last session passed Senate Bill 1001 and 1002, and the Department of Licensing and Registration is now putting rules together to enforce these. And one of the things that's come up as a point of discussion is where to locate chargers in parking structures. One of the people on that committee is a firefighter, and he's similar to you, about 40 years experience. And he's saying, not near the stairwells, not near the exits. Does it do any good, especially since you mentioned ventilation, to require that the chargers go on the top floor of the parking garage where there isn't a ceiling above it? Because one of the things that was mentioned in the latest meeting I was in was that the lithium-ion fire is about 3,500 degrees and concrete begins to fail. I think it was said at 800 or no, 1,000, and then iron inside of the rebar starts to fail around 800. So to avoid total loss of a parking garage would make sense to put the chargers on the roof.
Possibly, and Brian can talk about it. We'll go back to Brian, but yeah, it's an issue in cars in general because in Phoenix, Arizona, or Manhattan downtown, it's easy to say let it burn, but it's political suicide to let it burn. I mean, so Scottsdale, real quick. So Scottsdale, we've done a lot of training around the valley, and I have, and a lot of other people have. And so Scottsdale, Arizona, they get a Tesla that wrecks into a wall. People get out, starts on fire, and so Scottsdale is going to be smarter than all of us. And so they come in, they phone it. And so they figured, we'll put it out. Well, they put the car out. So they get a flatbed tow truck, puts it on. The tow truck goes 2 blocks down and it reignites. They drop it right in the busiest intersection of Scottsdale, Arizona, with shops and tourists and everything else. So now it becomes a second alarm hazmat that even Glendale, Phoenix and Glendale, 50 miles away, comes and helps out. And so they take an approach that was unique, and then now they're kind of have it in their back pocket. But they brought in a dumpster that is about 3 feet tall, and some sand, which means that you're dealing with another department, and it's going to take a long time, and it did. But what they did was they put it back on the tow truck, and the tow truck then lowered it into the dumpster, the half dumpster, and they filled it up with sand just above the battery line, wet. So it worked enough to get it to another site, which was one of the academies for Scottsdale, to let it burn, to let it continue burning out. Wrecking yards wouldn't take it because they got to make room so it doesn't catch something else on fire, because room is money. And so Phoenix has bought their own dumpster and everything else. And so they got it down to a little under an hour to do the evolution. This one took about 7. And so it's we're not there yet as to figure out what to do with them. Again, it's not, I'm more afraid of what comes off of the inside of the car and inside of a resident, because you're getting some benzene and arsenic and other gases in those, and firefighters don't worry about it. But new technology, when I came on the job, it was LPG or propane, and they had an incident in Kingman that was a rail car, and it killed, I think, 2 or 3 firefighters when it exploded. Thank you. And so it's technology, not the boogeyman. So we just need to figure out what we do with it on the adverse side of it. So my time's up. So
Yeah.
everybody's telling me.